Hi, Suzanne. Welcome to the Cosmic Heartist podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here. I would love if we could start by you introducing yourself and your business and your favorite things in the world.
Hi, I'm Suzanne. I am the artist and maker behind Una Artesana. It's a jewelry line I started during the pandemic. So my pieces for Una Artesana really focus on incorporating Filipino mythology and folklore into my jewelry pieces, because I just felt that there wasn't as much representation of it in general, but especially in jewelry, and so many Filipinos feel that kind of disconnect with our pre-colonial mythology and culture, and I just wanted to help people to kind of reintroduce people into it.
What are your favorite things to
Oh,
do when you're not working on jewelry?
gosh, like I feel like my whole time is really just like focused on my jewelry work. But I do love working with my hands. So if I'm not making jewelry, I'm currently working on a big crochet project. So I like doing that. I like to cook, I like to bake. And yeah, just anything to do with my hands. Just, trying to stay creative in different mediums.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I would ask if you know your sun, moon, rising, but I know that you only know your sun, which is Gemini, right?
Yes, I haven't I didn't get to ask my mom like the my time
The
of birth or
times.
anything, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It gets a bit deeper, but I think that's so interesting because you said you like to work with your hands, and that totally brings through either like Cancer or Taurus energy of just liking to crochet and create with your hands and do stuff in the kitchen and just get things together and see them tangibly. I think it's so cool. However, I love everything that you're doing with Una Artesana. I saw it pop up as an ad not too long ago on my feed, and I went into your page and I saw the way you talk about your jewelry and the way you talk about the Filipino mythology. And I was like, okay, I want to have her on the podcast to ask her all about this because um, I'm so into tying together. So I'm Indian by blood, and I'm so into tying together the Indian mythology and Filipino mythology because I feel like I'm here for a reason. Um, so I'm just so thrilled to be having this conversation about the mythology and the deeper parts of it with you, and I'm sure we'll go into it deeper as we go. But all right, so you said you started this in the pandemic. What was your what was your catalyst to start making jewelry?
I already had a jewelry line before the pandemic. I started that during 2017 and it was shell inlay based, so it was a craft that is very Cebuano, but I think over the past couple of years of doing that, by 2020, I felt a little bit lost because I felt kind of restricted by the material I was using. Like that's what I built the brand on, and I felt like I was so limited by that. So when the pandemic hit, I couldn't access my production. So in a way, it was both a little bit liberating to not be able to have to do that. But also at the same time, I felt lost because then like I had absolutely nothing to do. So it just started really because my sister found a bunch of old beads from her old high school projects and she gave them to me because she was either gonna throw it out, but then she remembered I was making jewelry. And so she thought, oh, maybe she could use this. And so it really started from there. I was just putting simple bracelets together, but then like I got really bored of that. So I just went on Google and said, what else can I do with beads? And that's when I found out about bead weaving. And so I started working from there. And it was around that same time I was also researching Filipino mythology and folklore, just as a pandemic hobby, right? And I felt like the stories I was reading could serve as an inspiration for the jewelry I was creating. Like it could give me some guidance as to creating new pieces, experimenting with new techniques. And um, I enjoyed what I was doing and I was posting it just some stories and I was getting some interest from friends and followers. And so October of that year, I decided, you know, what the heck, I'll launch it it was just a side project at the time. And I was thinking, oh, maybe by 2021, when things are normal, I could, just shelve that and go back to my original jewelry line. But as we know, the Philippines just kept going in and out of lockdown. And I was like, okay, I think like I'm just gonna keep doing this. And in 2022, 2023, that's when it really like kind of blew up. And so that's what I've been doing since then. And I'm very lucky that my work has been received the way it has, because it's given me an opportunity to not just explore my craft, but also things about my culture that I never knew about. And it's such a privilege to be able to share that with more people.
I love it so much, and I love the way you share on your feed, not only about your jewelry, but also about the mythology and also bringing in like the meaning behind everything that you're doing. And I think that's such a beautiful way to show up because a lot of times we just see what people are creating and we don't necessarily see the why behind it. And so just the fact that you're sharing this why, and this why is a huge why. I mean, just considering how much the Philippines has been through colonialism, how much has been erased from the actual past of the country, which I feel is so rich. Um, I feel like so many of us need to start talking more about it. So I'm curious to know what about Filipino mythology, or what about what you found was your favorite, or like a thing that really stood out to you that you want everyone to know more about?
I think it would probably be the first thing I ever found out about pre-colonial mythology, and it was the Visayan creation myth, because it tells so much about how our ancestors saw the world, like just the celestial objects in the sky and how we were created. I feel like if we read deeper into that, I think it could kind of give us an idea of not just what our ancestors believed, but what they valued as well. So it's a myth that I think you can keep going back to and keep reading, and you'll still find new meanings about it. And also just pre-colonial tattoos, that is really what got me into researching Filipino folklore and mythology, because so many of it ties together. Like a lot of the symbols on pre-colonial tattoos have bearing on from pre-colonial mythology and folklore as well. I think it just needs like a bit, something I need to do a little bit more research into that, but I definitely see ties between the two.
Okay, would you share with us a little bit about the creation story?
Oh, okay. So in the beginning, there was only the sky and the sea. The sky was ruled by the god Kaptan, and the sea was ruled by the goddess Magwayan. And they were always at war with each other until their children fell in love and um, married, and so the two gods called the truce. So from that marriage came four children, the Kalibutan, whose body was made of rock, Liadlaw, whose body was made of gold, Libulan, whose body was made of copper, and Lisuga, whose body was made of silver. So over time, their parents passed away, and in her grief, Magwayan, the sea goddess, decided to follow her daughter into the spirit world. And so, when the wind god died, the father of the children, they the power of the wind was given to Likalibutan, the eldest, whose body was made of rock. And over time, he got more greedy. He wanted to have total rule over the earth. And so he convinced his brothers, Liadlaw and Libulan, to lay siege on their grandfather's kingdom. But when they got there, they met their grandfather, who was very angry, and he threw lightning bolts at them. So the first one struck Likalibutan, and his body shattered into rocks. And the second one hit Liadlaw. His golden body melted into a ball. And the same thing happened when he struck Libulan. His copper body also melted into a ball. And their sister, Lisuga, was wondering what happened to her brothers, where were they? So she went up to her grandfather's kingdom in the sky. And in his anger, he also thought that she was part of the coup. So he threw a lightning bolt at her and it shattered her silver body. And after that, he confronted Magwayan, like, what happened? Like, was this you? Was this your plan? And she said, no, like, I've been in the sea this whole time. And realizing what he'd done, he was filled with remorse and grief, and but they couldn't bring back their grandchildren. So instead they gave them an eternal light and put them in the sky to shine forever. But for Likalibutan, knowing it was his doing, they decided to leave him there on the sea, where he would become the land upon which humans would walk.
Wow.
And there's another, I've only read this in one version so far, but It said that one of the silver shards of the Suga's body was planted into the earth, and that's where the bamboo that contained the first man and woman came out from. So it's like I recently went to this museum in France, and they had these celestial objects, and they had this one a container of fragments of stardust basically, and it said like we all come from stars, and I found that so beautiful. And then just like telling you the story of the Visayan creation myth and how we came from a shard of the Suga's body, and it's like, yeah, we are made of stars, and I've just realized that connection now actually. And I think like that in a way it kind of like kind of lets us know about what our ancestors believed as well, because we
Yeah.
have that such a big disconnect, and it's really just our folklore and mythology that is connecting us. And so I think that's beautiful, like there's that connection.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. And I think it also reminds us the divinity that exists within each of us. And I feel like it's it's really hard to come by people who believe that God is within us. And we're taking this to a very different point, but this is just how I love to jam on this podcast. So I just feel like this, just considering that we come from these shards of stardust or these shards of like whatever magic that fell from the sky. Of course, there is like God within us. Of course, there is so much magic within us. And I think it's so cool when we take the time to figure out what we believe, where we think we came from, and honoring that, yes, there is magic there, there is God there, there is love there. And it's only when we do that, I feel, that we actually start giving so much time to our passions or to the things that we want to create, because then we're like, well, if I am part God, like if God lives within me, then naturally whatever I share with the world is something that God wants to share with the world. And I think it just takes us out of the way. It takes us out of being like, why does nobody want to buy what I'm creating? And instead, it's like, I'm here sharing what I think is like my best thing that I can share with the world. And if they want it, they want it. If they don't want it, it doesn't matter because I'm not creating it for the world. I'm creating it for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. That takes away. I always feel such huge anxiety every time I release a collection. But yeah, I have to take it back to the why I did this in the first place. It's not to make money, although yes, this is my living, but primarily it's really a way to share, like, well, as corny as it sounds, like a piece of my soul, because I put so much of myself into everything I create.
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't sound corny at all. I think it's amazing. And I think this is a great part for you to share with us, how you create these pieces, especially the talismans, because I've been seeing it in your stories recently with the beeswax and with like I think it just takes such concentration and such dedication to be able to do it the way you do it. So would you like to share with us how you create your pieces?
Yeah, sure. So this also started during the pandemic. I'd wanted to create pieces like these since even before then. 2019, I was seeing a lot of historical inspired jewelry, and I just wanted to create something that was Filipino, because a lot of the ones I was seeing were like based on Western mythology and iconography. And I thought I wanted something that was our own. And it just so happened that when the pandemic hit and I had no access to jeweler's wax or any like fancy tools, but I knew from my research that pre-colonial artisans were working with beeswax, and I thought, you know what, why not? Like if they could do it, maybe I could try it for myself. And so I got in contact with a local bee farm, and I ordered some beeswax. And I just started working from there. I had very simple carving tools. They're still the tools I use. And it was just kind of getting to know the material, because from what I'd seen online, jeweler's wax is hard and it's easier to carve, but beeswax is much softer and it's very sticky. So I had to come up with my own ways of working with it and working with the simple tools I had. So in a way, I felt like while I was figuring it out, I felt kind of connected to how our ancestors were possibly working with this. Like, of course, I don't have evidence for the way they worked with it. I can only guess. But Yeah, it was very interesting to work with a material they used and with simple tools as well. I only really had like a candle flame to melt the wax and all, and just working with it with my hands. And it really made me fully appreciate the complexity of how our pre-colonial gold jewelry was created. Because I think nowadays, we have all the technology and all the tools to be able to recreate these pieces, but knowing that thousands of years ago they were making that with their own hands with like basic tools is really incredible. And I just, by creating my jewelry, like it's very simple compared to what they've done, but being able to have that experience, I feel like it connects me as an artisan to that artisanal heritage that we have.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. So you use beeswax and you carve the beeswax and then you dip it in brass. Is that how it works?
Oh no, so it's called, the process is called lost wax casting. So after
Okay.
I'm done creating the wax models, and this is a technique that has that is thousands of years. It's like 5,000 years old, and really it's not changed much except on the technology has improved it, but it's essentially the same thing. So what happens is you have the beeswax model or wax model, and they put it in an investment. It's I think it's kind of like a plaster. It's almost like a plaster consistency. So once that has hardened around the mold, there's a hole at the top, and they pour in the molten metal, so the molten metal melts away the wax and it takes the shape that was left behind. So the piece is solid brass.
Got it. Ooh, that's so cool. I feel like watching that process would be so trippy to witness the wax falling away and the brass taking its place.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't get a chance to post that, but I think I will in the next few weeks, or if not next year. I do plan on re-releasing the collection with new designs. I have like a bunch more designs that didn't make the cut this time. They just need a little bit more tweaking. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to be exploring more into this theme of pre-colonial symbols and like interpreting them for modern Filipinos, for a modern audience.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. So we are talking a bit about your pieces, and for someone that's listening and is here right now and they're like, okay, I want to know more about these pieces. I want to get some. What do you currently have available? Do you still have stuff available, or did
Gosh,
your launch completely wipe you out?
they completely sold out the necklaces that were the star pieces of the show. Yeah, they completely sold out on launch day. So I was so surprised at that because you know, I'm better known for the beaded jewelry I create. So I was very nervous about this launch because I was thinking, oh, like people are gonna be so, it's gonna be like a 180 for them. It's like, what is this? It's so different from what I do. But yeah, I did not expect it to do as well as it did, and I'm really happy that it did because now it means that I get to, expound on it more. So yeah, currently the pieces are sold out, but I will definitely be bringing them back in the new year.
Cool. So for anyone that's listening, just follow Una Artesana on Instagram and you'll get a hint when it's going to be launching soon. And it was just I said it before we clicked record, but it was just so cool witnessing you and your shock when everything sold out because me as like a viewer and from the outside, I kind of had a feeling that would happen just because of how called I immediately felt to your jewelry. So I was like, definitely, definitely they're gonna go. But seeing you receive um just the way the world loves your art, I think that was so precious. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always, I mean, like I've been so lucky that the collections that I've been releasing have done so well. But it's something like I could never take for granted because in business you just never know, right? Things are always
Yep.
changing. And I was just like I told myself like if I sell 5 necklaces, I'll be happy. So yeah, I'm so happy, and like I was so touched by the reception for these pieces because they've been 3 years in the works, and I felt like this whole year I was just kind of in self-sabotage mode because I couldn't I was so scared at how people would receive these pieces that I kept postponing, like kept pushing back the release date. And then finally I just decided like, you know what, if I don't release this now, I'm never gonna. So that's when I decided to just launch it this month. And
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like we just gotta I mean, self-sabotage is us getting in our own way, right? And then I feel like we just need to get in our own way, getting in our own way. And that's the only way to do it. We're like, you know what? I know I'm blocking myself, but if I just did it, like I'll never know what happens if I don't do it. And you were just like, I'm just gonna do it. And you saw what happened. And I think it's such a beautiful response. So taking from this, I want to go a little bit deeper into talismans and what you believe talismans are and how you feel like they are meant to be used.
yeah, so for talismans, I do believe they're a very personal thing. Like the inspiration for this collection is the anting-anting or gimat. Those are Filipino talismans. So just a little explainer to listeners, anting-anting are they're talismans that can take the form of a lot of different things, but typically you see them as amulets in the shape of Christian motifs. So you'll see them as the all-seeing eye, sometimes as the cross, or even the Santo Niño as somebody from Cebu. So yeah, I wanted to strip back that layer of colonialism and really root it back into its pre-colonial origins. Now, for me personally, talismans, as I said, they're deeply personal and they can take on any form. But for me as a jeweler, I see talismans more as jewelry pieces. Now, I've mentioned this in my stories before, but I feel like jewelry is it's such a powerful tool. Well, not necessarily tool, but jewelry at its most basic function, it is bodily adornment. So it completes your outfit. So that is at its most basic. But so many of us have jewelry pieces that mean something to us. Like maybe they were given by a loved one, you got them on a trip, or they were to mark a special occasion. And so those pieces have power already from the stories that we give it, from the memories that they contain. So I have a strand of pearls from my grandmother. So when I wear it, it's like I have a part of her still with me. Or this necklace that my mom gifted me on my 15th birthday. It's like, that feeling of, becoming a woman and being a grown up. So there are those memories that I can lock into, and they are a sort of talisman for me because they can give me strength when I need it the most. And that's what I wanted to put into these jewelry pieces. Um, as I said, we feel such a huge disconnect with our pre-colonial culture, and I just wanted to bring that back for Filipinos today to know that, we are not as disconnected as we feel. Like our ancestors are still there. So much of our pre-colonial beliefs still bleed into our Christian beliefs of today, and that's really what I wanted to highlight with these pieces. So I drew from symbols found in pre-colonial jewelry, traditional textiles, and even currency. And I kind of reworked that into symbols that could mean something to the Filipinos of today while still rooting it very much in pre-colonial mythology and beliefs.
I love that explanation of talismans because it takes me back to, and I saw it on your story, which is why I wanted to bring it back up because I love the way you explained it. Because I'm thinking about when I started getting into crystals, which was like 2019. And I was, as always, we're pretty much skeptics, being like, how is this crystal gonna work? Or how is it gonna help me? And now here I am with all my crystals. But when I was watching it or when I was learning about it, someone said it's just like a watch or it's just like any piece of jewelry or anything you keep, like anything that we keep holds memory. And like you said, a gift from your grandma, a gift from your mom, like these are things that hold memory. And then I think we pair it with crystals, which already have their own signature frequency, and it makes them that much more powerful, which is also why I'm so intrigued with your talismans, because it's not just jewelry, it's jewelry, plus it's a crystal that holds memory. And that way we kind of get to use it I don't know. I'd like to think that we're all witches, just like really uncovering the cycles of nature and getting to live more with cycles of nature. And when we have these talismans, it almost feels like it's just a gift being like you can do whatever you want, and we can put whatever meaning we want to any piece of jewelry or any talisman, and it can bring us back to that remembrance within ourselves, almost like a physical affirmation, isn't it?
Yes, that's definitely what I was going for. Like, you don't need me to give you power or anybody else to give you power because you already have that within you. This is really just a reminder that you can pull from it, pull from that wisdom and strength that our ancestors already had that is within you, and you can channel it anytime. This is just a reminder that you have it.
Yeah, I wanna it's one like I want to take this somewhere so much deeper and so different, which is how as humans, I feel like it's so important to have tangible proof of things that exist. And I recently am dealing with grief in the last 6 months
Mhm.
after losing my dad. And I'm just thinking about how, as humans, like we're just so attached to this need for something physical to remind us of something that either has existed, something that does exist, something that exists inside of us. It's so trippy that we just it's like we just need this physical representation. Like even with losing my dad, I have his photo over here on my altar, and like seeing him there, it's like, okay, he's here. But then not having that physical representation, it's just like I think it makes us question ourselves a lot more, and it makes us question a lot more things, not just ourselves, because I mean it is a tangible planet. And when you were talking about the creation myth, we were talking about the rock
Mm.
god first. And I guess that also that plays into it, because when we're talking about creation, um, we talk about what was tangibly created. Not necessarily, we never talk like, oh, spirit came to be all of a sudden and ta-da, there is the world. We talk about Adam and Eve were humans who were alive and ta-da, there is the world.
Yeah, for sure. And then just going back to what you said about having that physical, that need for a physical presence, like I definitely feel that so much. It's like I know I have these qualities in me, but sometimes you just need that physical affirmation that yes, you do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, and I feel as well as with losing a person, it helps so much to have something that they left behind. So yeah, like they're never really gone, but it's like having it there, like being able to touch it and like,
yeah.
wear it. It's like, yeah, they are still there. Like you can always like again draw on those memories, those stories.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's make me think about how after my dad passed, and my mom was like, okay, here's a necklace that he used to wear, and here's one of his rings, and here's one of his bracelets. And just knowing that I have those, or like knowing that I have his leather jacket that he once used to wear, it's
Yeah.
like reminders that, oh, he did exist. Like things do exist, even though we don't see them, they exist. Like he definitely still is here. Everything that we don't believe we have, we have. And
Yeah.
it's really just a matter of yeah, I feel because we are humans on planet Earth, having physical representations that remind us that it's really real. Okay, now I want to take this a little bit on a different path. Before we started recording, you said you went to Italy for your master's, and I want to know more about that. Would you like to share about what
Oh,
you studied and
yeah.
how you got there?
I was just in a very different trajectory at the time. So I studied interior design actually as my undergrad. And I was back then I was really thinking like I'm gonna be a furniture designer. So that's what I did after I graduated. I worked in furniture design and then I decided, like I wanna study abroad. I wanna, see what's out there. And I took up product design. So it was, I think the way they approach design in Italy, probably in Europe in general, is very different. It's definitely very conceptual. And so I feel like that has definitely shaped also the way I create pieces. So yeah, I it was I was just really I really just wanted to go abroad. So I was applying to different to different schools, and it was the one in Italy that I got accepted into. And yeah, I did that for a bit. And yeah, I have to say, like, I think it has shaped the way I create pieces. I think I this is not in any way to downplay Filipino design or anything, but I feel like my training here was really more aesthetic and material based. But when I went to Italy, they made you question more like why should a design be like this? What is its function? And like the story behind it. So I try to reflect that in my work. When I create something, I have a lot of why should it look like this? And it's really not just the function, but I mean, not just the form, but also its function. Like even if it's, just jewelry, it's something important to people, right? Like as I mentioned, its basic function is to make you look good, but it can be so much more than that. And I try to tap into the more of what that is.
That's so interesting. I love comparing the way different countries teach because I did half of my college over here, and then I did half of my college in Boston. And just listening to you talk reminds me of how over here everything was so much more theoretical, and over there it was all just so much more practical. It was like, okay, you know what you're doing, but why are you doing it? And then how are you going to do it? Versus over here, it was, okay, this is why you're doing it. And maybe that's because my first 2 years of college were here and the first 2 years in UANP where I went are in liberal arts. Um, but just witnessing the different ways that different countries teach. So I think it's also so cool that you got that exposure in Italy and this different way of learning and this different way of understanding things. Like different countries see things so differently, don't they? And just being a part of that country for a bit, it's like, oh, my mind is so malleable. I can think so many different things and we can shape ourselves in so many different ways based on where we're living. So my question now is, what are your favorite three takeaways from your time in Italy?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's been a while. But my favorite takeaways, well, the main one is definitely how they approach design. As I mentioned, it's very in depth, I would say. So that really changed my view and the way I practice design. Um, Takeaways. I'm trying to think.
But also,
Um,
like, it doesn't have to be work related, okay? It can
okay.
be like anything related.
Yeah. So being able to do that in general, to go off on my own, like it gave me, I think, a lot of confidence to know that I have it in me to be able to do something like that. Like even if it was just studying abroad, right? Like I know that I can, like you can put me anywhere and I think I'll survive.
Yeah,
That's what I
exactly.
learned. And yeah, just because it was the school I went to had so many different it was international, so I got to make a lot of friends from all over, especially friends from India. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I love that. That's what I loved about it. I love being in an international setting and getting to know different people's cultures. So with my Indian friends, they were the ones I was closest to. I really felt there was so many similarities between Indian culture and Filipino culture. Like even
Yes.
certain words, and the one that surprised me the most was achar, the pickle.
Mm.
Because I was like,
Yeah.
over here we call it achara. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
so I thought it was so cool. I love that. I love seeing like similarities and differences. I think it really makes you appreciate the diversity of the world, and it really,
Yes.
yeah, makes you appreciate that you're part of a bigger picture.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. And I love how you brought in the similarities between the Indian and Filipino culture, because like I shared with you, like that is one of my like the deepest things that I'm trying to unfold and share more about through conversations like this. Like it's even something as little as achara and achara. Like we
Yeah,
usually talk about the similarities between Spain and the Philippines, of course,
yeah,
but we don't necessarily talk about the similarities between the Philippines and India or the Philippines and Mexico or
yeah.
you know, the Philippines and well, Spain, yes, but just the Philippines and like Turkey, for example, like all of these countries that are so Asian at our core, but then have such deep like colonial mindsets. But when we strip away all of the what is it called? All of the invasions and all of the like um culture washing, I guess.
Yeah.
When we strip away all of it, at the end of the day, it's all so similar. I remember how I was once having a conversation with one of my Filipino friends from here, and she was sharing how I was sharing about the Indian gods and goddesses and how they're so colorful and how they wear, you know, such pretty outfits and they're all decked out. And she was talking about how when we think about like Batala and when we think about the ancient Filipino times and when we think about the tribes, like they were all filled with color and expressing themselves in a way that's not just Jesus hanging on a cross, because there's nothing wrong with Jesus hanging on a cross. But at the same time, like there is so much more light actually in this culture. Like there's so much more beauty. There's so much more um like I feel just color screaming to be known, and businesses like yours are businesses that are bringing light to this color. So thank you. I think it's so important to bring back the beauty that actually exists when we take away like freaking city buildings.
Yeah, for sure. That is kind of because every time I create a collection, it's also me like sharing in real time what I am learning. And it's just there is just still so much we don't know. And when you mentioned that connection between India and the Philippines, there really is that because we had this cult this kind of substrata of Hinduism and Buddhism in pre-colonial Philippines, and not many Filipinos know that. And in fact, I did I did a talk in 2022 at New York Jewelry Week on pre-colonial Filipino jewelry. So at the time, I was interviewing archaeologists and historians, and there were two that really had differing opinions on whether or not we had that kind of Hindu culture. Because his point was, we don't have any of the temples as evidence. But then for me, I'm like, we don't have any stone structures at all because that's just not how our environment is. Like if you look at indigenous tribes now, they're not making stone structures either. Their houses are made of bamboo and other more lightweight materials. And so for me, it's like you see that evidence in our gold. So there's the golden Tara, who clearly has like Hindu, Buddhist influences. And that for me, it's like, you know, you make things out of your most precious materials. You make the things you believe in through your most precious materials. And that gold statue was enough proof to me that this connection between cultures exists. Because I feel like so many people feel like the Philippines was kind of like a backwater, isolated area before the Spaniards came. But we know that is so not true. Like we had so
So
many
not true.
connections with the countries around us. And I just feel like it makes me sad when some Filipinos are in denial of that because it's like, it's in a way, it's sort of the colonial mentality that's still there. But you know what? Like, that's what I want to do in my work. I want to let you know that we had this beautiful culture, like, well before the Spaniards came. Like, we had something precious of our own and something beautiful worth celebrating.
Yeah. I mean, just like thinking about the Philippines on a map, it is so impossible for there to not have been like connections with the rest of the world. Like just thinking about how many islands there are and thinking about the shape. Like there were so many places where different like countries could come on boats and just dock. Come on, over 7,000 islands, and we
Yeah,
were not connected to anything. That's absolutely impossible.
yeah, for sure.
It's absolutely impossible. And also just thinking based on what you were saying about we don't really have the temple structures here. I'm just thinking about my most recent trip to India and which was around May, June time. And yes, there are temples, but I think more than anything, it's the reverence of the earth. It's the
Mm,
reverence of like just the mountains and just rivers and putting your feet flat on this ground and just receiving how much lives in there. And when we compare the lands of India to the lands of the Philippines, I see a lot of similarities when it comes to the mountains, when it comes to putting my feet flat on the ground and feeling the energy of the earth. Like, yes, we don't have the structures that were created as a result of Hinduism and Buddhism, but if we're talking about the ancient people were so connected to source that I feel they didn't need that tangible proof. We've become
Yeah.
so far removed that now we need this tangible proof of talismans and reminders. But I feel like back then, all they needed was the earth because they knew that they were connected to the earth, that we're connected to the earth.
Yeah, and so much of their religion, animism, is really rooted in nature, like knowing there are spirits in nature. I feel like, yeah, we didn't really need those structures so much as we do today, like you mentioned.
What do you think would be fun to share about when it comes to like Filipino spirits?
We were very much tied to our ancestors. I think when somebody passed, more often they would become ancestor spirits. So they're always somebody you can kind of tap into in a way, like to, tap into their guidance. Um, and I just feel like a lot of that kind of seeps in still in modern Filipino belief. Like you know that belief when you see like a brown or black butterfly, you're like, oh, that's your like your great grandma who passed away. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, tell me
So that's
more.
that's a thing. Like Filipinos are like when you see like a big butterfly, it's like, oh, that's your lola or your lolo. And then so there was recently, it was just this year, there was this big black butterfly that got into the house. And then my dad was really saying like, oh, that's your amma, like my grandma, because it was her birthday. So it's like, I mean, like in modern times, I think it's easy to laugh these things off, but to know that some people still believe in those things, like to know that our ancestors are still there, I think that's like a beautiful belief. Like, not it's not that you can accept that they're gone, but it's kind of like knowing that they're still there. And yeah, going back to that, having that tangible proof, right? So in a way that is like tangible proof, seeing something in nature that represents them, like their spirit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for sure, I think that belief probably is rooted in like pre-colonial beliefs as well.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I totally believe in that. And every time I see a butterfly or a dragonfly or any kind of like a bird near me, I'm like, yep, that is either my dad or my grandma or my grandpa or someone coming to say something. And that definitely comes from pre-colonial times. And I think it's also coming back, right? With a lot of us owning our spirituality, owning that we are like earthlings rather than being like Filipino or Indian or Mexican
Mm.
or Spanish or anything. We're earthlings. We're all actually the same. We all live on Earth. We all came from the same source. We look different. We talk different, but we actually all are the same. And another thing, I digress, but another thing that I want to come back to when you were talking about spirits, something that I want to bring in is when we talk about um, we don't hear this a lot anymore in Manila and Metro Manila, but I used to hear it a lot when I used to talk to my ayas from the province when I was younger about like the white ladies and about the
Yeah.
dwarves that live in the land and about the fairies that live in the land. And I'm curious if there are any myths that you have read related to these, or if there are any experiences related to just like earth creatures that you want to share about?
Well, I don't have any personal experiences, but my dad was telling me about his lolo's experience of meeting a kapre. So it was apparently this was in Bogo, so that's a town in northern Cebu. Yeah, so Bogo is a small town, and nowadays it's a city now, but it's still very small. So you can imagine back then in the early 1900s, it was still very much just like a small rural town. So in the story, my great grandfather was walking on his way home. It was late at night, and he sees this like small light, and he's like, "What is that?" And he goes closer, and it's a cup. Apparently, it's like this huge figure with a cigar. And so my grandfather was very scared. He just like ran the other way back home. So that's one story. And in recent, like last year or the other year, there have been stories popping up about aswang and sigbin, and that's here in Cebu City, where we're pretty much, it's a big city. But I just found it so amazing that these stories are still going around, because there was that the first story that came out, these I think two, three stories came out within the same month in different cities within metropolitan Cebu. And they were like, an aswang was flying through over these roofs of houses, and it happened again in another city that was like further south. And then just recently, just this month, there was this story of somebody who found skeletons in the ceiling of their house, and they can't identify what it is, and they're saying like, oh, it's a sigbin or something, and like, something supernatural. I just find that so amazing that like you would expect these stories from more rural areas of the Philippines, but to know that those stories are still here, like in big cities like Cebu, it just goes to show how deep our belief in the supernatural still goes. And I think that's really cool. Like to still have that connection.
Yeah, I think that's really cool too. I mean, all we see is versions of these in the movies. It's so rare
Yeah.
to hear about it in real life or to hear about it in news reports, especially. So the fact that that is happening, I think, is really cool and reminds us that, yes, it might be a little bit scary, but it's magic. At the end of the day, what it is magic. And just honoring that magic still exists in our world, no matter how much people have tried to kind of like shut it down and make it seem like it's life is not magic. There is magic and it's here, and the supernatural is living among us, and we can turn a blind eye and be like, no, that's absolutely crazy, or we can be like, oh my god, actually maybe that exists. And how would that change our view of the world if that exists? I think we would be so much like our thought process would be so different. We would be so much less uptight. We would be so much more like, holy shit, we live in a place where aswangs are flying through roofs. Like that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and for me, definitely, it just speaks to how much of our pre-colonial beliefs, like our ancient beliefs, are still there. Like we are a mostly Christianized country, but I just love these little moments when you can still see our pre-colonial culture still shining through.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do it so beautifully with your work. So thank you for
Uh,
sharing about pre-colonial Philippines. I have a couple of last questions for you before I let you go here. My first question is, what do you feel like makes you a artist?
Oh, yes, I said I put so much of myself into my work, like not just my research, but um possibly also the stories and my own beliefs into them. Like I'm not making you believe them, but I'm sharing that part of myself with you. And as the wearer, I invite you to also put yourself into these pieces. Like so much of my pieces are yeah, rooted in Filipino culture and belief, but quite a few of them were also like based on like memories of growing up here in the Philippines. So my Diwata collection last May was all about Filipino flowers and like remembering my childhood with them, like especially with the santan chains. So that is like an invitation for you to put yourself into these pieces as well. So it's like it's a jewelry I feel is very much a collaboration between the artist and the wearer.
Amazing. And where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram at Una_Artesana, and I am also on TikTok at Una.Artesana. and on Facebook as well, although like I'm not as active on Facebook. But yeah, and you can also shop my pieces at una-artesana.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's been such an honor having you on the
Yeah,
podcast.
thank you for having me, Karina.